What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Bathgate. I'm the CEO of Sang Lucia and Wall Street Jesus.com, and I'm here with Wall Street Jesus. Say what's up, Jay.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for joining us for another interview in our Flow Traders series. We're doing this whole series as a lead up to the launch of, or should I say, the relaunch of Wall Street Jesus' flow trading course, which is called the Complete Flow Trader. You can learn more about that over at wallstreetjesus.com. I'll have some more information about that a little bit later. But yeah, this whole series is really just a series of interviews that we're doing with flow traders from different backgrounds and walks of life to really tease apart how people use this information, how they do it, leverage it to their advantage, the mistakes that a lot of people make that these traders are able to sidestep. So we really hope that this is informative and illustrates a lot of the edge that you can get from using this data to your advantage. And so there is literally no better person on this planet to talk to about this subject than the man I'm talking to right now. Jay, I want to the way I want to structure this, because this is kind of hard, me being the interviewer, because we're talking about something that you have talked about for thousands upon thousands of hours in your life, right? And so I don't want to bore you to tears with like really, really basic questions. And so the beginning of this is just going to be, I want to get a couple, kind of basic questions out of the way for people who maybe are stumbling upon this. They aren't really familiar with flow or unusual options activity, or maybe with you. So the first couple minutes will be about that, but then I really want to dig in and get maybe more specific and a little more advanced, and talk about some stuff that people who have followed you on Twitter or YouTube or something like that would be interested to hear you talk about. They might be a little more familiar with flow. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, perfect. Sounds perfect.
Cool. All right, so let's start out with just like on the most fundamental level, what does flow do for you as a trader? Like, what is the role that it is doing for you?
Yeah, and that's actually it's a more difficult question than it seems, because it can do. I think it can be a lot of different things. I think it's important to understand what you're using it for and what you're trying to gain out of it, the information. I think the beauty and what really was a draw for me to flow was that you really didn't need to be a specific type of trader. You didn't have to trade a specific time frame. You didn't have to trade specifically options, right? And those of you who know me out there know that I trade a lot of equity. I've been an equity guy my whole career. So you don't necessarily or specifically have to fit a certain bill to really find an edge from this information. And I think, but before we even go on, I think it's important to understand, like, when you talk about an edge in this game, and that's why I think this, with flow and the way we use it, the way we look at it, can provide. It's not a crystal ball. It's not a machine that's going to spit out tickers that you could just tail and cash a ticket every time.
Right.
What it does is, before you use it, if you use this information the right way, you will see better performance after incorporating, in my opinion, this type of information into your trading repertoire than you were before, right? And we can go over a few examples on why that is for specific, for different types of traders and time frames if we have the time. But again, going back to your original question here, the questions, there's a lot of information to that question, because it's a pretty broad subject, right? There's a lot, especially now these days, options can be used for a number of different things, and is used for a number of different things out there. But me personally, if you're asking for me, the main, I think the main thing I use, and the type of order flow that I'm looking for, what I'm looking to get out of it is almost kind of a real-time momentum indicator. I think that would be the primary use of what I'm looking, or why I use the flow. So think about any I mean, indicators we all have used and currently use a gazillion different type of indicators out there, and I think the way I use Flow is, from what I've come across, is probably the best, the most efficient real time momentum indicator that I have come across in my career.
Right.
And I've used quite a few things. So that would be the primary thing, Charlie, that I use it for on an intraday short term basis. But I also use it for stock selection purposes and ideas, an idea generator in a sense, for larger time frames. So a couple different things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the way that you're kind of describing it, we've talked about it in the past, is it's almost like a performance enhancer. It's almost like steroids for traders, right? Flow.
Yep.
Like if it's not, we're not here saying that if you just start looking at Flow that all of a sudden we're going to turn you from a trader who's bleeding money to printing money, right? I mean, it's not type of operation we are. We don't sell bullshit like that.
Right.
But what we are saying is if you do have a perspective, a methodology, a way of analyzing markets, what we very, very often see with our traders who layer Flow onto that is, it just, as you said, Jay, I mean, it gives them such a better read on short-term momentum in a name, going to give them maybe a read on longer term, sentiment, the narratives that are taking shape, whether or not, the actual activity in a name is kind of living up to that narrative, or whether it's diverging from that, and whether news is covering that, right? It's just going to help traders be more precise, right? More on the ball, more informed about decisions they're making. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, and again, there's like, for let's say, let's specifically talk about trading, just for trading purposes in general, right?
Yeah.
I think the simple way to look at it, and kind of how I looked at it initially, and still currently look at it, is, let's say you look at charts or levels, whatever, the tape, whatever you currently are using, and let's say you have some confidence in some of the skill set you've built, but you still, you're missing that little thing to take you over the top, or find some consistency, or just basically just bump a higher probability of success in your favor, right? And I think
Right.
that's where the Flow, especially used correctly, can definitely get the job done, and where people find the most success. So, example, right? Let's say you're trading off certain levels, you map out technical levels, right? And
Right.
you have a stock that, when it reaches certain support level, you want to get long the name, right? If you're anybody realistic in this game, you're not going to have 100% win rate in anything you use, especially levels, right? You're probably not going to have a 90% win rate or an 80% win rate, but you're convinced you can win more than lose trading off levels. I think the easiest way to look at how Flow can be a beneficiary would be, okay, if now that name is at current support levels, and now there is aggressive buying from professionals coming in at that level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
basically doing exactly what you're looking to do, right? So almost a confirmation indicator in a sense. And the way I looked at it initially, and I think it allowed me to be more patient and allow myself to find success, was simply looking at it was, if the stock, for where I'm looking at it right now, is a 50-50 probability, 50-50 chance of going higher or trading lower from certain spots I was looking at it, with the addition of aggressive buying in the Flow that we're picking up, was it bumped the odds of that stock going a certain, like, higher, for example, I'm using here, what would be the increase in odds from 50-50 off that buying, right? I can
Right.
make the argument 60-40. There are other people who would easily make the arguments even higher than that, right? Off aggressive buying, maybe 70-30, 75-25. And that's what an edge is in this game, right? That's an edge. It's not just that one stock specifically that could turn out to be a loser, and you can be wrong. But if 7 out of 10 are winners, or 70 out of 100 are winners, if you're doing all the other things you need to do to find success in this game, there's your edge. And that's how you can hang around this game and make some money over the long term, right? So that's kind of the way I approach it and I look at it and
Yep.
recommend everybody else does.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. I mean, it feels like obviously you were one of the first people to really start publicly talking about the importance of flow and unusual options activity. I mean, you literally coined some of the terminology that is now used like publicly to talk about flow. So you were very early in on this. And then there was sort of an explosion of services and other people talking about it just in recognition of how important it is, I think. Do you feel
Yeah.
like I feel like maybe around 2020, there was a little bit of even more of a turning point where options activity began driving the prices of the underlying even more? I mean, do you think flow has
Oh
become
yeah.
even more important in the last, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years compared to even before that?
Uh, yes. Well, more important, yes and no. And here's why I say that. First of all, I wasn't no way the first one to look at order flow or unusual activity. I think maybe in regards to the way we look at flow,
Yeah.
certain characteristics of flow, we definitely were one of the early ones. But
Yeah.
the Nigerian brothers, as everybody knows out there, was extremely popular. They were
Yep.
on that halftime show talking about unusual activity. That definitely got the popularity going. Several people on Twitter, even before, well, kind of when I got there, but started to
Before you,
talk
yeah,
about
you were
flow.
early, dude. I think you're being humble.
2011, I think 2011, I got on there around
Yeah.
there.
That's early
Yeah, so that
days,
was
man.
pretty early. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, again, what I'm getting at is this: that even when I kind of gained an interest to flow, it was in regards to kind of what the Nigerians, the way they use it in unusual activity terms. So, in other words, you see a large buyer, right? A large order that's unusual
Hmm.
for that specific name.
Hmm.
And that was, I think, the draw to me because, you know, and I think once the retail crowd post COVID, when they were locked in their homes and sent a check to trade on Robinhood, once they got wind that they have access to this information, I think kind of light bulbs went off for them as well, to the point where people really wanted. There was a big demand for this stuff because it was almost like um, insider activity in a sense, but in real time, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You get like these hedge funds report positions, new positions they take. That's old information. We get that information months after that fund may have taken a position.
Right.
Insider activity, you get days later than where that insider bought that stock. The beauty of the flow was you can see some of the more professional buying out there, big money, right? And in real time, right in front of your eyes. And I think that's the allure. That's the kind of the draw that got everybody interested in it. But what I realized early, and we could talk about this, what I realized early, it wasn't as easy as everybody wanted it to be. Right? What the sexy part of flow, in a sense, um, it wasn't as easy as just looking for that and following that and making money. And I think you see a lot of that right now on social media.
Yep.
You have a million different services now that kind of offer what we offer, or try to offer what we offer, but their approach is they're looking to spit out this information and handpick, cherry pick the one or two names that qualified and you could have made money with, and ignore the rest. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
Where it's obviously a lot more in depth than that, and that's kind of what this course is about, right? Is
Right.
understanding what you need to look at specifically for your style of trading, and you being able to cut out a lot of the fat, a lot of the rest of the noise, and look at just that information because it suits you. And that's the only thing that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that you go in depth into in the course is identifying like the common mistakes that people make when they're trying to trade off flow and unusual options activity, and then teaching them how to not do that. Right. And I don't want to reveal everything in this, but I wonder if there's one particular mistake that you feel like you can just speak to about that you see people making often when they start to trade off flow? Like what is one of the things that you see people doing that you're just like smacking yourself in the head, being like, when are people going to learn not to do this over and over?
Well, it's like I don't even know if it's a mistake, but I think the most common thing now um, that people do is, again, there are other services out there. Now you could get a lot of the information for free too. You really don't need services for the way a lot of people use this, but they're just looking for size orders or,
Right.
a large amount of buying of calls and puts in a name and
Right.
just scanning for specifically that and go and oohing and eyeing over that and risking their capital alongside that, thinking it's just about a large amount of aggressive buying coming into a name,
Right. Right.
without looking at the rest of the action or the act, not even just that day and days prior or days overall in the name, which could mean a variety of different things. So I'll give you an example, right? If we see a GameStop, somebody coming in, right? Kitty Cat or whatever the hell his name is, coming from Reddit, coming in and
Right.
buying a shitload of GameStop, right? That's fine. Like on the surface, that looks like a lot of buying and a bullish directional play for us, right? Very
Right. Right.
easily, just looking at that, we can extrapolate that information into, okay, let's take a ride with them. But without looking at the rest of the action around or in that name, I mean, he could be closing, right, a larger position or the day before even a
Yep.
larger position in that name, and it may not even be a bullish directional play he's making on the action you're seeing and getting excited about, right? So
Yep.
there's more to just setting a scan and that spits out big orders and thinking, you could just look at that and assume that information is an edge, right?
Yeah.
So, that's just one of the things. I think even the most common thing that you see on, all over social media. They're just talking about those specific big orders that anybody can scan for. You don't even need a service to pay for that these days. And, thinking they have some inside information of a big amount of buying that's going on, and it could be the complete opposite, right?
Yeah.
So that's obviously something you would want to try to avoid, right? That's definitely something you would want to try to avoid, whether you trade off flow or not, is making a bet on that when that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and we kind of empathize with like the temptation, right? I mean, the whole philosophy behind flow trading and why, Jay, your sort of marriage with Lucci, because he's a tape reader, it goes so well together, is because the entire premise is based on, moves in the market are created primarily by large players, by institutions, by funds, and for us smaller players out there, prop traders, independent traders and whatnot, like it's our job to, we can make money if we can track what they're doing and ride the waves that they're creating. So we understand why people get excited when they see, a bunch of zeros behind a block order, something like that. Unfortunately, a lot of that flow is worthless. It's meaningless, right?
Yep.
And that's a lot of what you teach in the course. I think, as you also spoke to, you do a great job of helping people customize and personalize like what they're looking at to their trading strategy. I think a lot of people just like come in and they just try and blindly trade this stuff, and they don't actually think about, well, if I'm swing trading, versus scalping, I need to be looking at different types of orders. I need to be factoring this information in, in a different way. So those are just two of kind of the bigger mistakes that I feel like people make all the time that we've seen you remedy for people, through the
Yeah,
course.
and in regards to the course, and I definitely want to make this clear, and I think we made it clear even last year when we did it. Uh, it's not a deep dive into options, right? I'm not even going to pretend to um, say to you guys that I'm some options guru and I'm going to tell you about the Greeks and gamma, delta, and how all these little intricates, what they mean and uh, how you could use them, right? There are a lot more intelligent people when it comes to the option world than myself. I'd be the first to admit it, right?
Right.
The way what I'm looking to do in the course and what I'm trying to do is one, share with you guys based off my experience, that's one of the beneficiaries of being older. The only beneficiary to being older is that you have some experience. So if you've tried stuff, you've learned stuff along the way. That is just, it's impossible to know ahead of time unless you know somebody who's gone through it. So
Yeah.
based off my experience, what I have pretty much the fat I've cut away in a lot of the options game, right? To get it simple enough for anybody to look at it and use it no matter what type of trader you are. And I like that's where I start off a lot of that course. I start off saying like my number one goal is for people to leave that course and have something to put into action immediately, right?
Yeah.
Have almost like a checklist sort of thing. And it can differ. It could differ from one person to the next, right? Depending on what you do. For somebody who just trades ES or SPY or the overall market, obviously it's going to be a lot different than the other person who's trading individual names. The day trader is going to look different than the swing trader or the longer term investor per se. So that's ultimately the goal, and I just wanted to mention that because I don't want people to think that they're going to come in and I'm going to like professor like break down the options world to them from
Right.
volatility to all this other stuff. And the reason why I mentioned that, Charlie, that stuff is huge. Like you look at social media, like everybody wants to pretend they're a genius and a guru talking about that information. And a lot
Yep.
of these people are, I'm not for a second saying they're not knowledgeable on the subject. What I'm saying is for a lot of the average traders out there, especially newer to the game, there's no edge for you out of it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? There's
Mhm.
there's a lot of noise. It'll make your head spin, but there's nothing you can put into action tomorrow and make you better off than where you were before you learned that information, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the goal of what we're doing here. Is just again not an informational guide to options, but what I've used and what I've seen others use around me to basically trade with an edge off this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I mean, you're exactly right. If you're watching this and you're like, is this course for me? And but you don't know how to like read an options chain, or there's some really kind of basics around trading, or you just really want a comprehensive sort of education around trading. Then that's what the master course is for, the Sanglucci Master Course. That's really the role of that. This
Right.
course is specifically about flow, unusual options activity, how to implement it. And as Jay said, a heavy emphasis on practicality, on how can you, I mean, Jay, you said this in the last live version of the course that you taught, like you want to help people identify their fat pitch. You want everybody to emerge from
Exactly.
this being able to know, okay, I know when I see this type of flow and I see this type of activity, this type of movement, this is my fat pitch because it works with my style of trading, my time horizon, that sort of thing. And now I have a higher probability of taking a swing and connecting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing, right? Like you don't even need to be you don't even need to trade options. Not even close, right? You don't even need to trade options or even know how to trade an option, to be honest,
Yeah.
to basically benefit or learn something from the course that I do, and that's what I try to do. Because again, I, people don't realize me. I trade equity. I trade the equity more than I trade options, to tell you the truth. But I think that was the beauty of flow to me. And again, what got me interested, it was just like there's basically almost like inside information in within the flow in real time. I don't need to trade options to benefit off that. You know what I mean? If there's
Hmm.
a bullish thesis that I'm taking away from the buying or the selling that's going on in the options world, I could trade that via equities. I could trade that via the futures market. There's a
Yeah.
million different ways. So that's generally, yeah. And I wanted to make that clear, especially on this webinar, so people understand, what we're talking about here.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we have a bunch of futures traders, a bunch of equities traders, not just options traders in our community, who've come through the course. And when it comes to geeking out on the Greeks, we don't go too in depth into it in the course, but one thing we are going to geek out on is Gamma. So, as part of this interview series, I'm going to have David McKim, who's the creator of the Gex Ray, which is a tool in our community that is all about Gamma that people love using. I'm going to have him and Norse, who is helps run our company, our head of product here. We're going to come on and have a conversation about Gamma and how it relates to Flow, and they're going to teach 2 classes in the course. So Gamma is a pretty hot topic, and Jay, you've obviously talked a good bit about
Extremely
it in the
hot.
past.
Yeah.
So those
And
guys are going
and
to give
and
some
for those of you
insight into that.
who, again, if for those of you who I talked a little bit about earlier about trading, utilizing the flow, trading it alongside something else, like for levels, I gave an example of. That's where a lot of people and the tool that those guys you mentioned, they came up with that GexRay tool that basically is plotting out levels for a lot of the actively traded issues, from the indexes to the NVIDIAs of the world, to where it's kind of a roadmap, right? You could use that, again, I'm not giving too much away, but you can use Gamma in a way to kind of concoct a roadmap alongside the flow, and use flow as a confirmation indicator. And even better, because you remember the conversation we had, Charlie, like when you brought that up, I thought like I was gonna talk about
Right,
that, and I was like,
right.
no, 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 no,
Yeah, you
that's not
had like
my right. That's not my cup of tea. I can't forget it. I'll make people's heads spin. And then when you told me that they were gonna, it was in addition to what we were doing. Oh, I
yeah,
felt so much better because they are a lot more knowledgeable and can explain the topic a lot easier than I can.
yeah,
So that's good.
yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit about, like, let's try and ground things maybe in this kind of current market environment, right? So, it feels like market is pretty stretched right now. Kind of a lack of quality, and activity and new names, putting a break on things just a little bit. I mean, how do you feel like Flow is helping you navigate conditions like this? How is it? Yeah,
Well,
supporting you?
again, some people may look at it as a good and a bad thing, right? And I'll tell you why. The bad thing could be if you mention new names, because that's kind of my almost like I call it my seatbelt, but think of my risk manager in a sense. When
Yep.
I'm not seeing aggressive buying, right? Out of a certain aspect of flow that we're looking at every day. If I'm not seeing aggressive buying of new names, for example, that's telling me that the risk appetite, right? The appetite for new risk is kind of slowing down, right? It's
Hmm.
simmering down. And throughout my career, what that's allowed me to do is allowed me to put less risk on as rallies potentially get longer in the tooth, right?
Hmm.
So a
Hmm.
big problem for me, uh, the problem for me, and every trader has one issue that they gotta overcome, if not multiple issues, before they
Right.
get over that hump. Mine was that I had no problem making money during rallies, right? Again, in my opinion, I would do that as good as anybody out there, right? And a lot of luck would come into the equation in regards to that anyway, so it wouldn't bother me much. But I avoided the most important thing, and that was being bearish during upside, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that wasn't a problem for me. What I miss out on rallies. My Achilles heel was that every time the rally ran out of steam, right, and we would run into some correction or pullback, I would give the bulk of those profits I made along the way to the upside back every time,
Yep.
right? Sometimes giving it all back. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world for me. I mean, all that work, all that excitement, right? You catch a nice winner, you're doing cartwheels, there's no better feeling in the world. And then, a couple of weeks, a month later, you're giving all that back. It just drove me nuts. So
Yeah.
the one thing, and this is probably the only thing I give myself credit for, is that it doesn't take long for me to realize. You know what I mean? If I can't make money doing something, and I will swallow that pill, right? I'm not one of those people that is gonna fight reality, right?
Right. You can put your ego aside and accept what's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the better way to put it. Exactly. So I knew early on that this had to be solved. I'm spinning my wheels looking or trying to figure out anything else in this game if I don't solve this problem. If
Hmm.
every time the market goes up, I'm going to make money, and then as soon as it goes down for a couple of weeks, I'm going to give it all back. I'm heading towards a brick wall. Time, no matter what I find. So I
Right.
had to fix that problem.
Yeah.
And one of the things, in addition to a couple of the other things we're going to talk about, in the course as well. But one of the major things was that what we just talked about, the buying of new ideas, because a lot of time when the momentum seems to run out of steam, there is a lack of buying of new names, new ideas, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And more rolling, which is profit taking in the options world. And
Hmm.
when you see that, even if you're holding on to um, positions that you're holding along the way, just avoiding being able to avoid putting on additional risk, right, late stage in that cycle, the less of those profits you would give back when the market rolled over. So that helped me out in a great way. Now, I said that's the good thing about it, right? The
Yep.
bad thing about it is the market doesn't just stop and roll over when you want it to. You know,
It
the
doesn't?
first war,
What the hell?
the first warning sign you see out there, the market doesn't just stop on a dime because you saw something that made you cautious. So there are rallies that can continue to go higher, and while you're not putting on any new risk, you may be still participating, but you're not being aggressive. You're not making as much money possibly as you would like because
Yep.
the market's still going higher.
Yep.
And that would be the negative. You know, there are a lot of people, for example, who are the more tactical players out there, shorter term horizons, intraday, where they don't mind trading the same names, especially maybe off minor pullbacks uh, and stuff like that. Because they're nimble enough to get out of the way, right? They're not holding any baggage if the market rolls over the course of the next couple days or weeks.
Right.
So there are ways around it, but generally, big theme and big picture wise, that's what's prevented me from achieving, in other words, solving that issue that I explained to you a couple minutes ago,
Hmm.
getting that issue out of the way. And again, it doesn't matter. It's okay giving some money back, but when you give it all back and then some, that's where the problem lies, right? And
Yeah.
by getting a gauge on the flow and new risk appetite, again, you may not be making as much money anymore, but you avoid getting lumped up, and that's what'll keep you in the game longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you said at the outset of this conversation, people use flow in a lot of different ways. There's not just one way to do it, but definitely one common denominator that we hear from people in our community and people, who take the course is that it has helped them avoid maybe the 10 to 20% of the worst trades that they would have made. And if you take any trader, especially somebody who's sort of like a little profitable or on the edge, some months profitable, some not, and you remove 10 to 20% of their worst decisions, it's going to have a huge impact, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think that's exactly what you're speaking to. Okay, so that speaks a little bit to how it's helping you sort of keep a read on things, in this current market environment, which is definitely messing with a lot of traders' heads. Obviously, right now everybody is obsessed with the AI plays, the Nvidias of the world. There isn't a single market participant in the world who isn't kicking themselves right for not buying more, Nvidia
Right.
before it ripped. Are there any trades like from sort of that sector, maybe SMCI? We talk about just as an example of how flow could have tipped someone off or played a role in somebody catching one of those moves.
Yeah, well, the reason probably somebody brought up the SMCI to you is probably, well, twofold, if not more than that. One, it's one of those names where we started to see some action in, we really weren't too familiar with. And then when you took a closer look, you realized that, wow, this company has some fundamentals to it, has explosive growth to it. And what ended up being one of the big winners of that AI theme, right?
Hmm.
And for big picture stuff, for those out there who may want to take the course or may want to join the Steam Room that are not active traders, maybe they work a 9 to 5, or maybe they're just investors in general. That's the way you would look. That's the way you would look towards the flow. You would look at the flow to benefit your style, right? Is
Hmm.
trying to discover some of these potential bigger winners early. Okay. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times, like you can run scans or you can look at companies individually and you can see that a company has growth and fundamentals. But the problem is if Wall Street doesn't see what you see, right? If the volume doesn't find that name, you can be sitting in it forever before that happens, right? For a lot
Hmm.
longer than you would like, I would say.
Yeah.
The beauty of the flow and primarily sweeper activity, what we look for is that when these type of companies get the attention from aggressive call buying, okay, that right there is indication that the street's eyes are now on that particular name, right?
Right.
Somebody is noticing that particular name. And that doesn't usually last too long, right? If sweepers are aggressively buying it, if bulls are aggressively buying it via options, usually there's not too long before another round of buying is coming in and follows. So
Yep.
SMCI was one of probably the even bigger than Nvidia because it was a lesser known name, and we saw some sweeper activity start to show up in the name, and that was even before this parabolic run that we've seen recently. This is going back to last year, I think it was.
Yeah.
So that's one particular example, right? On a
Hmm.
longer term time frame,
Hmm.
some of the biggest winners out there, and not just at SMCI, I can rattle off a couple names, but just in general, some of the larger names that do trade options out there, you will pick up on from flow. The problem is, will you pay attention to it or will you take it serious? Because there's no hype around those names when they first start to see buying. But a lot of the big winners that you grow accustomed to through bull markets, there was that initial sweeper activity that tipped you off before it really exploded.
And
But
that's the
even a more, go ahead,
that's
I'm sorry.
well, that's the edge, right? I mean, you're saying, you might miss it because there's not a lot of talk about these names, but that's the point, right? That the
Of
flow is
course.
tipping you off before these things are becoming a part of the conversation, and therefore you're ahead of it, right? You're positioned ahead of it, and you can ride that wave before it's trending on Twitter or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know if my screen's up. Is my screen up?
No, but I can turn it on for you. There we
Uh,
go.
like for example, again, and Nvidia is the more popular. Let me take some of this stuff off quickly. Nvidia is the more popular name, but even an AI play like this VRT, and you could
Mhm.
see this sick move over the last 2 years in the VRT. This
Yeah.
was a name that again caught that aggressive call buying that we look for. We really didn't know much about it. We didn't even know it was an AI play particularly. But there was aggressive buying in a name that really doesn't catch a lot of action,
Yep.
and ended up, now this thing catches action flow every day. It's an everyday thing.
Hmm.
So, but again, you know, it's a good feeling, even whether you own it, whether you rode the upside or not, knowing that there's something out there that can tip you off to a good portion of these things earlier on than you would probably do yourself, and that like you said is I think the biggest and broadest edge on longer term time frames out of flow. But going back to SMCI, Charlie, what I wanted to mention is and interesting that you bring it up right here now today, because recently a lot of the guys in the steam room cashed a nice ticket in this SMCI off sweeper activity, right? So just an example here, right, for trading purposes. You had a name here, like we all know, that ripped basically parabolically in a straight line, right,
Hmm.
and now has gone into kind of some digestion, right, consolidation, as we say. Okay. There's no way of knowing in this consolidation when momentum is going to come back into the name,
Hmm.
right? We
Hmm.
can guess, we can play off certain levels, right? There's how would we know that information, right? It's predicting volume that may come into the name. Maybe
Hmm.
there's news that comes out, right? But there's no way of knowing ahead of time. So what we look for, and this is something we cover a lot in on the course, are these type of setups where it's quiet, okay, by itself, there's no edge really trying to determine when this thing may show some life again, right? It's kind of some randomness to it. But right here, I think it was Thursday of last week, if I'm not mistaken, Wednesday or Thursday, all of a sudden we see a wave of aggressive call buying coming in, mostly short term strikes, so shorter term bets on the call side, right? So indicating to us that no, not somebody making a huge bet longer term on the name, right? But indicating to us that whoever, whatever fund, whatever that thing that was buying that these calls aggressively was looking for momentum to come in over the short term for whatever reason. Maybe
Hmm.
he's looking for news, maybe he's looking for an upgrade, maybe there's some conference, whatever the reason. But that information, that flow, the edge there was that prior to that flow, we were pretty much guessing when momentum would show up in this name. Maybe we get lucky and we get right, but there's no edge out of that, right? So
Right.
basically, in 50-50 probability type thing. Now, with that aggressive call buying that we picked up on and came in, right, which was right here basically, um, our edge now, again, whether you bump the odds just 60-40 of bullish volume and momentum coming into the name, those odds and that probability does get a bump, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you manage your risk and manage your bankroll properly, which you have to do no matter what, you can see how that's an edge and that can make you money and find some consistency over a longer term.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, can we talk just like on a practical level? What somebody who's trading, let's just say SMCI, they think there's a trader. Like, what do they actually have to do? Because I think some people, especially when we used to talk about tape reading, and Lucci would show his screens, show a level 2 in a time and sales, they'd be like, "Oh my god, that looks impossible!" Right? It's just like numbers. It looks like the Matrix just running down your screen.
Right.
But flow is it's a little bit simpler, right? I mean, essentially, you're talking about having a unusual options activity feed being coming to you, whether it's in the steam room with us, the wise guy alerts, or if you're in
Mhm.
some other service, right? And then you have your filter set for this particular name, and then you're just watching for unusual options activity that's coming up, and you're watching. You need to know how to read it, right? You need to understand how which orders matter, which orders don't. But that's all you're really doing, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
simple. You're
and
just
and again, that's what we cover in the course, right? As
yeah.
long as you can make the call with a decent amount of conviction, right? And it's never going to be, well, I wouldn't say never, but it doesn't have to be 100% conviction. But as long as you can make a high conviction call that it's legitimate buying coming in, right? It's buying. It's not a player closing a position. It's not necessarily a player rolling a position, taking profits off the table. That somebody is making a directional bet on the short term basis here that this stock is going higher, right?
Mhm.
And that's what we cover in the course, being able to clean up a lot of the mess to make that determination. Okay. And that's like you mentioned, that's your confirmation basically. It works as a confirmation indicator for traders, right? You just you just got confirmed from one of your indicators, flow, right? And it's specifically the type of flow we look at, that momentum is going to show up in the name, right? There's a higher probability of momentum showing up in the name. Now, and the reason why I mentioned earlier, like there there's no better momentum indicator in real time that I've ever come across. Give me another indicator out there, name it, that does that for you in real time,
Mhm.
right? With that type of success. There's nothing, right? Like you have relative strength, right? And a lot of people are looking for overheated exhaustion signals, overbought, oversold. You have MACD, which is a popular um, momentum indicator, but there's nothing that you're going to see almost an instant reaction in. And again, it's something we cover in detail on the course. You're going to see an instant reaction of a change in momentum when it triggers, right?
Right. Right.
And we're talking about specifically here traders, right? And if that's what you're looking to do, you're looking to trade and you're more tactical as in regard to time frame and stuff like that. That's what we discuss. That's what we go over and review. What you
Yeah.
need to look for to find things like that, and the ability of being patient, sitting around waiting for those type of situations is ultimately what where you find the more consistency in your game.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got a couple more questions for you. I want to give a quick plug again for the course. I mean, Jay, as anybody who knows Jay knows, he's extremely generous with the amount of information that he puts out in the public and his time. Jay, we've been partners in this business together for, I don't know, 8 years now, right? And you've been doing, multiple hours a week for that long. I think you've missed like 2 weeks in that entire span, of just analyzing markets, talking about flow, like putting out a ton of free information. So theoretically, like, could you devour all of the publicly available stuff that Jay has put out there and piece together a lot of the learnings from this course? Yeah, you could probably, if you were willing to put in dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, you could probably do that over, and maybe get like 80%, of the value of it. And if that's what you want to do, more power to you. That information is out there on our YouTube channel. The reason that we created the course is to make it as efficient as possible and as easy as possible for people to take the edge and the advantage that this information gives them and learn it and then apply it to their trading immediately. We also have, like I said, we got the 2 classes on Gamma with Norris and Dave. That's new. And you get 3 months in the steam room, right? So you get 3 months of being in the room, not only with Jay and Lucci and Ranch, our leading educators, but with the rest of of our trading community there's some killers in there, guys who are taking down 7 figures on a monthly basis, and also guys who are like trading $25,000 accounts really, really well. There's some very, very good traders in that community who can learn a ton from. So we basically just smashed it full of as much value as we can, trying to make it a no-brainer for anybody who's thinking about just acquiring this, this skill set of trading, of flow trading, adding it into their trading. You can save 20% off of it if you use KNO Flow 2024. That's No Flow 2024 at checkout before classes start on July 1st. So that's my little spiel on that. Let's talk a little bit about one of the things that someone in the community was flagging for me was like this kind of bird flu scare and Beyond Meat, Wingstop, like the flow that those names were getting. Do you feel like is that an example of names of how flow can tip you off to moves before news even really like puts them on a broader radar?
Of course. That's, I think, if you ask the majority of people in the room, that's in the steam room I'm referring to. That would probably be, I would predict that would be probably the most common response you get from most of the traders. Let's take another example, and most people know because we talked about on and on some the majority of the public webinars. GameStop, okay, before Kitty Cat even tweeted out a video, right? Before Kitty Cat, he was long gone, dead and buried, even knew he was alive. We picked up on aggressive call buying, right? Specifically the type of call buying sweeper activity that we look for. We picked up on that activity well before Kitty Cat even got involved, let alone everybody else on social media buying the calls, buying the stock, and getting caught holding the bag, right? And that's the difference, right? And granted, I'm around a long time in this game, right? And I'll be the first to admit it's easier said than done with the majority of shit in regards to the market, right? But I think the difference in what the flow has done for me over the course of my career, okay? And specifically like this GameStop chart and what just happened with it, okay? And you can see the circle here, right? I
Yep.
was looking and focused on GameStop here. Okay. And I was actively trading it as well as many of the Steam Room members here. Okay. I haven't even looked at the stock at all here.
Hmm.
Okay. That's the difference. Here is where it got my attention. Here is where we were all wondering, okay, what's going on? Okay.
Yep.
After
Someone
the
knows something.
fact, right.
Yeah.
And we were the only ones. Nobody wanted to talk about GameStop. Nobody, let alone trade it. Nobody had any interest. Why? Because the stock was dead. It was a dead heartbeat, right?
Right.
No
Right.
volume, no action, no excitement, no nothing. Okay. But the flow tipped us off that there was something cooking, right? There was something cooking. No, I didn't know Kitty Cat was coming back, right? And I don't know if it was Kitty Cat's friends, his other little kittens that he associates with, sweeping up the calls. But the flow got our attention and definitely signaled to us that there was something going on for them to be positioning in the name like this, especially being the name was so dead. Okay. And that was, again, that's the edge, right? Us and just the people buying those calls were the only ones in the stock. The stock, as you can see here, just started to move, right? After we saw that action come in. Now, at this point, where we are now, everybody's talking about it. Everybody owns it. Everybody is down on what they own. Kitty Cat has posted a million videos, tweets, and GIFs, or whatever the F they're called, right? What edge? There's no more edge there, right?
Right.
What
Right.
edge do you have in this stock anymore? There's zero edge in this stock. Okay.
Right.
Everybody knows what's going on right now. Okay. And that's the difference. That's the difference. That's the difference for me, trading off flow in the way we use it to where, not trading off the flow. They're really, right? I won't be able to pick up on that edge. I won't be able to be a part of that edge without the flow, in my opinion.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a great example. And I mean, you have been very outspoken in the past about talking about how crypto is not your bag. You don't really feel like you have any kind of edge in crypto. It's not like you weren't trading, Bitcoin during COVID and all that, but because of flow into some of the crypto miners, you started to build some positions in some of those too, right?
Yeah. Well, again, if no matter what the company may do, okay, if it's catching the type of call buying that I like to see, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
shoveling dog shit as a business or making chips for AI, right, is irrelevant, really. Okay.
Yeah.
If
Yep.
somebody, something, some fund is aggressively building a position in a name, okay, I want to put my money there along with it. Okay. Those early stages when nobody knows about it, nobody is aware of it, that's where I have an edge, right? Whether I end up making money or losing money, as silly as it may sound, is irrelevant. Okay. Because I know that the majority, more than not, I'm going to make money in those type of situations.
Right.
Right.
You're
So
playing
kind
the
of like
odds. Yep.
the crypto miners, for example, as you said, I'm no Bitcoin aficionado. I still have no clue what the hell Bitcoin is or Ethereum or any of that shit. Okay. But when I see names that have on the last crypto, to not go into too much detail, but the last rally in crypto, those Bitcoin miners frustrated a lot of people because they didn't rally with Bitcoin
Right.
for a reason God only knows, halving or whatever it may be. I still don't understand. Okay. But the Bitcoin miners didn't participate in that rally. Okay. So frustrated a lot of people trying to catch that trade. Okay. Then the stocks went dead, right? They didn't move. They lagged in the rally. Bitcoin kind of went into consolidation, and those Bitcoin miners went into dead time with it. Okay. And then what we started to pick up on was some of these more speculative and what we thought crypto miners we're getting some real attention. So in other words, when momentum's coming into crypto, you'll see a name like Coinbase, right?
Hmm.
See the action. You'll see a name like an MSTR, which owns Bitcoin, catch the action. What we started to see are names like Wolf, okay? Seeing aggressive buying, even as Bitcoin and Coinbase weren't really doing anything,
Hmm.
okay? So now, again, it's fun. Sometimes we waste our time, but we all like to try to guess what may be going on. Why are they buying some of these more speculative minor plays instead of a coin? If they think Bitcoin's moving, what the hell could be going on, right? But
Right.
once you see enough of that aggressive buying, right, it almost slaps you in the head. Okay, you got a $2 stock, even less than $2, that they are buying like they got the cure for cancer, right? You stop thinking about the why and you just want to be a part of that, right? They got to
Yep.
be buying it for a reason if they're buying that aggressively. Okay.
Yeah.
And here, again, these are my favorite situations, especially as an equity player, because you got a $1.90, $2 stock, right? That's kind of been dead money here. And they're coming in and buying calls that are even more expensive than the actual stock. And you don't have to be a wealthy player, right, to buy a decent amount of a stock trading at a buck 90 to make a dent. Okay.
Right.
And again, the risk reward on a situation like this, you have a stock that's been trading in a pretty decent range here, right, with a nice floor around the buck 75 range. There's been some support. Okay. If you're wrong, that's kind of where you're a loser and what it's going to look like. But if you're right, who knows? Right.
Right.
And that's kind of what we've been seeing play out here. The buying continues still to today. We see the flow still an explosion in the coal buying. And you have a stock that's gone from $1.90, hit a high, close at a high today of 451. Right. So again, without seeing that flow confirm, even if we liked the name, liked the setup, without seeing that flow confirm what we were looking at, we don't know, we don't have any idea, in my opinion, of whether this thing is just going to still be dead money and stuck in a tight range or when it's going to break out, per se.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, again, that's not kind of, but that's really the edge out of the flow. Again, it gives you a higher probability of that breakout, right? Not 100%. It's not 100% certain you're going to get that breakout, but it's a higher probability than what it was before that coal mine came in.
Yeah.
And again, and the point of the story is here, right? What we're starting to think now, and I think we're right, that this is not even a Bitcoin play. They're not buying these names based as a Bitcoin proxy. They're buying it as a data center power play, is what
Hmm.
these names are being bought at. So
Right.
again, we don't know the reasons ahead of time, but a lot of times you find out the reasons when it's too late and the stock has already moved a lot higher.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the most beautiful parts about it and the way that you approach things and the way you trade. There's a lot of people who, especially people who've been around in the market for as long as you have, 25-year career, and who kind of tell themselves a story that they're geniuses and that they understand why everybody's doing what they're doing and that's why they've made money. And I feel like for you, you're like, I don't I don't know why people are doing it. I don't really care. The only thing that matters is what I can see is happening. Or is the activity there? I don't know why. I can't get in the head of the hedge fund manager who was building a position and, in this name, but I can see he's building a position. That's all I care about, right? And that simplifies your decision-making process and removes a lot of variables that I think can like send other traders off into a tailspin.
Yeah, and the key is too, as a trader, you don't need even that fund who's buying it to be right to make money, right? When funds are building a position, especially in a cheap stock, right? They're not buying it at $1.90 to $2 range, right? They may be accumulating between $2 and $4, okay,
Right.
and that's 100% return on a trade potentially for you just off the buying that came in, not even being right. right? If that fund who's building a position in this stock from a buck to two, if they're right, they're looking probably for a $10 to $15 number. Okay. But just based off that buying that came in and the ability to be able to get in the middle of that buying early enough, you got 100% return on the stock without that buyer even being right. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Well said. Well, I hope to everyone watching, that this was informative. This is definitely the tip of the iceberg in terms of the level of detail that Jay gets into in the course. I really hope that some of you are able to join. Jay's an incredible teacher. He's we've got boatloads of emails from people saying that he's literally changed their life with the things that he's taught them, the skill sets that he's taught them, and just like I think you can hopefully hear it in this conversation, the attitude, the perspective that he exudes, the humility that he has, that he brings to the markets, which is, really essential if you're going to have the kind of longevity and the kind of career that Jay's had. And I think a lot of people want to have. So I hope some of you get to join us in the course. Like we said, it starts July 1st. And you can save 20% off before then if you use coupon code NOFLOW2024 at checkout. Go to wallstreetjesus.com/complete-flow. And you can learn everything that Jay teaches you in the course, and a whole lot more on that page. So we hope to see a bunch of you there July 1st. And Jay, really appreciate you doing this, taking the time. Hope you have a great day off tomorrow, man.
Yeah. Holiday. Keep forgetting. That's right.
Right.
Yep. All right. No problem, Carl. Always a pleasure talking shop. You know that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you, man.
Okay. Have a good one, everyone.